Dr. Chuck the Science Schmuck.
Synchronized. The humidity in here is absolutely atrocious. But apart from that, let me tell you a story. There was a time when I lived in Texas, specifically on the coast of Texas, the eastern coast of Texas. I'm not sure if Texas has a west coast. Check the maps on that. I happened to be one summer day walking along the beach of Texas when I ran into the habitat of Aedes tadiorhynchus. Aedes tadiorhynchus is an extremely aggressive salt marsh mosquito. I received, probably over 1,000, maybe not 1,000, probably several hundred bites. So much that I actually had a systematic reaction and, fever and shaking, just covered in bug bites. But there's something that I saw that disturbed me far beyond, the normal disturbing things I see on the internet. I was being bit by these mosquitoes when suddenly I saw a mosquito 5 times the size of a normal mosquito biting my thumb. I was like, what in the world is that? Why is it huge? I was so surprised by the sheer... That's a fruit fly. I was so surprised by the sheer girth of this mosquito that I didn't even swat it. I just looked at it like... Fast forward, several decades to this weekend. I'm outside in my garden, which at this point is weeds, about this high. Higher than that because I'd be standing up in the garden. You don't sit down in the garden unless you're trying to sneak up on somebody, they're coming to get your tomatoes and you grab their ankles. And I look down and what's biting my leg but a giant, massive mosquito. And I said, how are you here? So I slapped it, but careful not to destroy it completely. Until it was stunned. Then I put it in the refrigerator for like 2 days, which, interestingly enough, it's not the only mosquito in my refrigerator. There is a mosquito in there just flying around, which, I don't know how you're living in the refrigerator, guy. That's kind of weird, but hey, if that's where you want to live, that's where you want to live. This mosquito, though, didn't. It got paralyzed. It did wake up a little when I tried to, pull it out, but kind of the thing, refrigerator, 40-degree temperatures stuns mosquitoes, but doesn't kill them. Unless we're working with Culex. So Culex is just, don't try to, that's what's living in my freezer. Those things will not freeze. Fruit flies. The majority of mosquitoes, though, will be paralyzed temporarily or stunned. If you freeze them, they then die. I have this mosquito here, in this cup, dead. Let me show you. There's a penny in here.
Oh, that's blurry. Why is that so blurry? Ooh. I can't use this clip in the video. Definitely can't use this. What am I supposed to do now?
It's on a stand. It's not even plugged in. What do you mean you can't move it? Huh. Well, apparently there's technical difficulties, according to my film man. I don't have a film man. I'm alone. I'm just talking to nobody in particular. If you've ever seen my camera stand, it's just a post holding up the camera. So I'm talking to myself. Oh, well, that's bound to happen if you spend enough time in this basement. Because the gas, it gets to you, and you start to see things, and hear things, and know things. So here's a high-resolution image I took with my cell phone. That may not be incredibly apparent, but this mosquito is massive. Compared to a normal mosquito, it's huge. You ask yourself, where do you find a Texas mosquito in New York? And the answer is it's not a Texas mosquito. This is actually a Saurophora, probably ciliata. Saurophora is kind of a less common type of mosquito that does exist. So generally speaking, within the big spectrum of mosquitoes throughout the world, you're going to see 3 big genuses. If you're in a more southern place, you're going to see Aedes. So probably Albopictus or Aegypti. They're usually present in the southern United States in a lot of warmer areas. They're small, black, they have lines. Albopictus is actually very striking. It's a black mosquito with a big white line across its top. Farther north, you're going to get Culex and Culecoides type mosquitoes, which are lighter, airier mosquitoes that come out at dusk and just tear you apart. I've got a million upstairs. That's why I'm in the basement right now. Because I don't have screens upstairs, because screens weren't invented when this house was constructed. And there's bugs down here, but they're not mosquitoes. The other one you're probably going to find is Anopheles, but that's not really a huge concern, even though it's the most deadly mosquito in the world because it transmits malaria. Malaria is not commonly present in the United States generally, but we do have Anopheles. You're going to find Anopheles. This is a very large mosquito. Saurophora are giant. The only mosquito you're going to find that's ever bigger than a Saurophora in North America is Toxorhynchides, which, despite having a name that has toxo in it, is actually totally harmless. Toxorhynchides is a nectar-feeding mosquito. Interesting mosquito trivia that you probably know but may not. Only the females feed on blood. The blood is not strictly required for the survival of the mosquito. It is required as a protein source to generate the eggs. The female and the male, throughout most of their life, feed on sugar, like a normal fly would, drinking out of flowers and nectar and such. So that's what this mosquito probably ate for the majority of its life, till it had the misfortune of trying to bite a schmuck. Now, what am I going to do with it? You may already know, because you've been looking at my desk, and you've noticed that I've brought out the rosin. I'm going to preserve the mosquito in rosin in this mold that I prepared out of aluminum. So, part of the problem with that, turns out I took the recyclables out this week. I almost never do that, because as a hoarder, I tend to accumulate trash. But I did. I took them out. So, instead of using actual cans, I'm just going to heat up aluminum foil to melt down the rosin. And actually, there is something of a problem with my aluminum foil supply right now. I bought a ton of aluminum foil, but I kept it right next to where I kept the lye. Turns out over time, lye is in fact corrosive to what it's kept in. So it escaped and corroded all the aluminum foil. So I mostly acquire the aluminum foil by cutting holes in the can. Okay, so you want to maintain this temperature just right to not burn the rosin and set it on fire. We learned this... Ooh, that smell. Okay, we learned this last time with the amber experiments, which is basically what I'm attempting to do right now, is preserve this mosquito in something somewhat similar to amber. This is not amber, it is rosin, which is one step above tree sap. So if you haven't watched that episode, you can go do it if you want. It's long and boring, and I gassed myself with acidic byproducts of the process, but the point is, tree sap contains a variety of organic compounds. If you then heat the tree sap, the turpentine or volatile aspects, which you can drink if you like dying, they evaporate and they're distilled and they're turned into turpentine, which is a solvent. The harder aspects become this, which is rosin. Doesn't have a taste, but it sure is gritty. Hard, solidified, non-sticky tree sap, or non-sticky until you heat it up. So this material can be cooked and melted down into a gooey liquid, which is what I'm doing right now. It's very sticky. In fact, that's why my desk is so sticky. It is not exactly amber. In fact, while I'm waiting for the last steps of this, I'm going to turn down the heat somewhat. Amber is a fossilized version of ancient tree sap produced by trees that no longer exist. They're extinct, not because of human activity, just because they were hundreds of millions of years ago, they've subsequently gone extinct. Alright. So, first things first, I need to not burn myself. This stuff is very hot. There's a slight spigot built into the end of the aluminum foil for the purpose of distributing a small amount of goo. Now, why a small amount of goo? It's because this stuff is not very dense. Meaning that if the mosquito is placed on it in pure liquid form, it will float and it will go to the top and then the material will not cover it. So, what I want to do, hopefully the mosquito is... Okay, yeah, amber produces a ton of gas that sets off smoke detectors. I opened a vent, so the mosquito is hopefully very dead. The idea now, the idea is to affix him into this, or her, it's a female, is to affix the mosquito into the material so that it is stuck and it cannot float. I'm back. As you can see, this is starting to smoke, which is a little bit corrosive on the lungs. The mosquito is now quite certainly dead, because although this didn't capture on the film because of a technical glitch, when I froze it to kill it, the bottom layer fractured and cracked up and stuff, so I had to pour hot stuff onto it to get it, stationary again and to fix those cracks. The effect is not pleasant for the mosquito, but it was dead, and it's also a mosquito, so I was going to swat it anyway when I first saw it. Exposure to this stuff, which is well in excess of the boiling point of water, essentially fries whatever it comes in contact with. If you recall my previous video with this stuff, exposing it to powdered milk caused the milk to instantly sear, which was a horrible reek, which this is actually reeking and it's setting off things, so I kind of need to hurry. The next stage will be to finish the cat by taking this and pouring it on the fixed mosquito, which is now in relatively dry sap, or rosin. The main issue being, this is very hot and very sticky, so you need to move with absolute care so as not to burn yourself. Also, the gas is kind of corrosive. So that momentarily reheats the entire column of rosin to the same temperature, so the mosquito does continue to fry. Regardless, now I'm going to go over some more scientific mumbo-jumbo. So, first consideration, is this stuff amber? No, this stuff is rosin. Rosin, as I've explained, is tree sap with most of the volatile products boiled out. Obviously, I can generate volatile products by cooking it. That is not the same thing as amber. Amber has undergone long-term polymerization, the molecules cross-linking to form various solid things, to make it much harder and to produce what is essentially a mineral. So tree sap becomes something more like rosin, and then it becomes copal, which is almost amber, but not quite, and then it becomes amber, and that's what you see when you actually go to a museum and you see an insect embedded in something. That is an insect that has been in there for hundreds of millions of years until it has been compressed into a mineral. Theoretically, if you heat that up, it will melt. Amber does melt, supposedly. I haven't tried it because the stuff's expensive. Will this ever become amber? So if I left this mosquito out, and I just sat it down, in the ground, would it become amber? That's a difficult question to answer. The trees that made amber were an entirely different species that no longer exists. It's not because we cut them all down, but because it was 100 million years ago. Almost everything that was 100 million years ago now is gone. There are a few things that are evolutionarily similar, but that period of time, those trees don't exist. So the trees that made what is amber now are not around. The trees that make this stuff today, which is pine trees, so this is actually manufactured by when you cut down pine trees, this is the sap that just spews out, and that's what they make it out of. It's Georgia pines from logging or cutting down trees for various uses. Will this ever become amber? Well, there probably will be amber derived from modern pine trees, but that's tough to say. That's going to be millions of years out. We don't know if modern trees dropping sap will produce amber. It's difficult to say. This stuff may not have the chemical requirements necessary to become amber. I'd say there's a good chance it does. But it's not guaranteed. So this probably won't be amber, it's just sap, like me. Other thing, this mosquito bit me. It was full of my blood. So that leads to the obvious question. Who's that looking through my door? The second most obvious question being, is a Jurassic Park scenario possible? I know, bizarre, right? Is it possible to take the blood from an encapsulated mosquito and clone a dinosaur? Or, in the case of this, if this exists 100 million years from now, future, fungus tree people, will they be able to take this and say, this mosquito fed on a human, let's get that human, and then they grow a me, and then there's just like an army of schmucks that raise havoc in their world, which would be hilarious, which hopefully they manage to do, but that's very unlikely, because Jurassic Park is obviously science fiction. It's not real. In fact, the concept of just taking DNA from anything and turning it into a thing is already well beyond what we're capable of doing. I mean, think about taking a vial of chicken blood and making a chicken out of it. And that's a lot easier. That's fresh blood. There's no genetic decay of, millions of years. It's not been partially digested by a mosquito. It's right there. We can't just take that DNA and turn it into a chicken reliably. If you're doing that with something that is not a species that currently exists, it gets even harder. Even if the DNA preserved in amber was perfect, you have to consider, well, how would we actually generate a viable egg? We can't exactly put dinosaur DNA into the uterus of a modern dinosaur and expect it to make eggs. We have to build a sort of quasi-egg thing, which you might be able to get around using surrogates, but that technology simply doesn't exist right now. Let alone the fact that that DNA probably has substantial decomposition. It's detectable. We could detect dinosaur DNA, but even if a dinosaur came up frozen in an ice cap, it's probably not going to be useful DNA. The DNA over time breaks down. It fragments. It breaks into pieces. If you really wanted to construct a dinosaur, you would have to take a piece of the gene and say, okay, this gene looks very similar to this gene, but has differences. So we're going to synthetically generate this and switch them out. And that would take far greater technology than we have now. For cloning a me from this mosquito, I'd hope they have the capacity, because the world needs an army of schmucks just to rampage over their crops. And, wreak general havoc, turn all the cereal boxes sideways in their futuristic tree fungus people Walmarts. But probably not. So the fact that the mosquito was fried probably means that it was fried, that the DNA itself is fried. DNA is pretty durable. It's like proteins fall apart pretty easily, but DNA at high temperatures usually just splits and then can recombine. So the DNA probably is detectably viable. I didn't cook the DNA out of existence. But could you assemble a me out of it? Well, probably not. I would hope that it's possible, but really it's not exactly a viable thing. Nor would it have any particular use, despite what science fiction will tell you. When you make a clone, you're basically just making a baby version of whoever you were. It doesn't have your memories. It may have a mind that's slightly similar to yours, and has various characteristics. I mean, a clone of me would probably look somewhat like me, except without all the extra nipples. It will not have my memories or thoughts like they do in science fiction movies, so what is even the point? It's not really immortality, it's just reproduction. Immortality comes by, uploading your brain into a fungal flesh tree so that you can oversee the cloning of yourself from a preserved mosquito that you made millions of years in the past. Hopefully this video will be available to the flesh fungus tree so they at least have some idea of what I did. Which, if you consider how well YouTube might exist as like a system of data within servers over long periods of time, who knows? By the time someone's seeing this, they could have dug up a server that has this piece of data on it, and the human race could be dead for 1 trillion years. Probably not 1 trillion, that'd be like Black Dwarf period, but, 1 million years. So maybe I'm the ambassador to a species that can't even understand what I'm saying right now. Guys, try to find where you put my skeleton. This mosquito should be near it. Clone me. You need me. Not for any particular purpose except, schmuck around. Somebody is driving with an engine somewhere. Well, that's almost a gibbon, which is actually a small monkey that lives in Southeast Asia. Or is that a gibbon? Regardless of what may or may not be a gibbon, and whether or not that was a motorcycle that just drove through my living room upstairs, I have waited for the amber to cool. Oh wait, it's not actually amber, it's sap, just like me. Now, I pulled it out of the aluminum foil, and additionally sanded down the edges, which you get a meniscus in your back. Actually, you get a meniscus on liquid, which is when the surface tension of a liquid causes it to climb the walls of the container. So, not syrup, oh, it's sticky like syrup right now. Not really. I just washed it, which is why it's a little damp. But the surface tension causes the sap to rise to the edge slightly, so you have to sand that off so it's not sharp. Interesting trivia, if you try that with liquid helium, the meniscus is infinite. It will just crawl vertically until it gets out of the container and just flows wherever it wants. Supercooled liquids are weird, that's why I don't have any. That and they're expensive. And we're going to run out of helium in 30 years, so good luck with that. Anyway, I tried to sand this with the Dremel tool, the problem being it exploded because I have a moisture problem. Like, it is amazingly moist. And a couple inches of water, just because it's summer and it rains sometimes. So I ended up using the sander, which is rusting and moldering, even though it's plastic.
I think that's the best focus I can get.
That's not going to work. So, the mosquito and my DNA are now sealed in tree sap. It looks like the mosquito did get slightly damaged in that the blood kind of plumed. Oh, the moisture. It's causing lungs turning into mold. Ugh. That's actually histoplasmosis. Doesn't really affect me. It's carried by bird feces. This is a different kind of mold. This would be aspergillosis. Which, if you ever seen an aspergilloma, that's basically what I'm made of right now. Anyway, it's very hard to get the camera to actually focus on this because the camera doesn't have like an autofocus. It just sort of focuses at the range I've put it. So I can't like get this close to the camera. Maybe I'll take a cover picture. Yeah, the cover picture will probably have this in more detail. But essentially what amuses me about this is that's a mosquito with probably some aspect of my DNA still intact into it, preserved in sap. And it makes me wonder how long this thing could exist. And with everything I create, there is a finite lifespan. In theory, you build any machine. You build a car, for example. The engine block is going to eventually turn to rust and disappear. The tires will decay. Everything in it will disappear. How long will this piece last? The short answer is probably not longer than 30 years. Not because it'll decay, but because it'll get destroyed in an accident. A meteor strike, a riot, a fire. This light's on fire, it'll just burn. However, there is a small possibility that this will just persist. Like it'll go somewhere. It'll get buried in something, and it'll just be around forever. Maybe in a million years, this will have condensed to copal and then condensed to amber, and somebody will actually manage to dig it up. Whether or not they can get viable DNA from it is up to them, really, but I made it. And I like that I've achieved this. It's not useful for anything, but neither is anything I do. And with that, that concludes this episode, I think. I have to get out of here before the moisture gets me, but at least the smell of burning amber, burning sap, burning whatever fluids, is depleted, because it got absorbed by the moisture I'm now sitting in. Do remember to not like and subscribe, or like and subscribe. It doesn't affect me, because I don't actually care terribly much. I do like comments. If you have any ideas for things I need to do, I like knowing, but you don't need to comment specifically, because probably by the time you're seeing this video, that will be the only piece of DNA left in 10,000, 10 million, 10 billion, 10 quadrillion years. The first black dwarfs will be showing up in the universe. I'd like that video to live this long, but right now I've just got an extra.